From Fox 5 News, a special presentation from the Fox 5 Storm Team. Eye on the Tropics.
Whipping winds, driving rain, catastrophic flooding. Hurricane season is here, and Georgia often sits in the path of the storm, suffering damage, destruction, even fatalities. Tonight, we're taking a look at the 2025 hurricane season and a look back at the lessons learned when devastating hurricanes hit, as the Fox 5 Storm Team keeps an eye on the tropics. Thank you for joining us. I'm Fox 5 Storm Team Chief Meteorologist David Chanley. June 1st marks day one of the Atlantic hurricane season, and our mission is to prepare you and your family for storms that can affect your life, your home, and your property. For the next 30 minutes, we'll break down the predictions for the hurricane season. Plus, we'll tell you about the continuing recovery efforts from last year's hurricanes. And we'll take a look back at an unforgettable hurricane, have a look at what we learned from one of the worst hurricanes to ever hit the United States. Let's begin with this year's outlook. Looking at wind shear across the tropics, looks like it's going to be a little less. That'll help the formation of all these thunderstorms. Also very warm sea surface temperatures, especially in the Gulf. Now, on average, we see 14 tropical storms. 7 become hurricanes, 3 major hurricanes. Dr. Philip Klotzbach and the Colorado State crew suggested it may be a little higher than that. 17 are their numbers. 9 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes. Now, NOAA has come out with their forecast as well, and they're kind of doing more of a spread between 13 and 19 named storms, 6 to 10 of which could be hurricanes, 3 to 5 major hurricanes, which is a Cat 3 storm or greater. But regardless of the numbers, playing the odds a little bit more than the seasonal average, but remember, it only takes one storm to be your storm. It's been more than 8 months since Hurricane Helene slammed into Florida, then moved north, causing damage in Georgia and the Carolinas. For some in the Carolinas, that destruction was catastrophic, damage they could not come back from on their own. That's where a woman from Georgia comes in. She's made it her weekly mission to bring help to people who are still suffering. Fox 5 Storm Team meteorologist Jonathan Stacy went along as she loaded up and delivered some much-needed help.
Western North Carolina.
When they would say a hurricane was coming, we're like, oh, the creek's gonna get high.
Thursday, September 26, 2024.
We were here like 7 o'clock the night before. It wasn't bad. I didn't think when I came back the next day, this is what I would see.
As Marissa Peck heads to bed in the mountains, 500 miles to the south along the Gulf Coast, millions brace for impact. Just before midnight, the Cat 4 storm slams into Florida's Big Bend, then into South Georgia, lashing Atlanta, Athens, and Augusta as it moves northward with its aims on Appalachia.
I have friends there, and they're trapped.
Meanwhile, in Madison County, Georgia, an hour's drive east of Atlanta, Jennifer Moody doesn't realize her own roof is damaged because her eyes are glued to her Facebook feed.
They kind of said anybody that's not search and rescue needs to stay away.
But with determination in her heart and donations in her pickup, Jennifer made her way into North Carolina by October.
We're not a nonprofit. We're just 3 women that got together and said, we want to help.
The 600-mile round-trip drive is now a weekly routine. We follow along for her 27th ride into the storm-ravaged region. Our first stop, Haywood County.
It's still needed, the help's still needed.
Chris Griggs runs Camp Restore Hope under this tent in Clyde.
You don't want people having to choose to pay their light bill or buy groceries.
As Jennifer's donations come in, so do the phone calls.
Help them with whatever they need.
Food, water, and whatever they need.
Down the road in Canton, this young man's smile lights up the Beulah Baptist Church Fellowship Hall. I ask him why he looks so happy.
Stuff like this could really help people out in the long run.
This dad-to-be walks away with diapers, detergent, and his dignity. He's just one of 60 folks Pastor Barry Clark and his small but mighty army are helping out today.
This stuff is soup starters.
Jennifer has been a godsend for this church. She's brought up load after load, week after week. She brings us a lot of things that an EBT card won't purchase at the grocery store. The paper towels, the toilet paper.
Helene, the deadliest storm in North Carolina's modern history. All told, 107 lives lost across the state, 43 in hard-hit Buncombe County. Donna Fink is Jennifer's eyes and ears here on the ground, and today's guide into a community called Craigtown, just southeast of Asheville.
A 10-minute drive the night before turned into 5 hours to get over here.
And the place Marissa's family called home until that Friday morning.
Tyler and our oldest, she's 9, they got around the building up there, and I heard her say, "Where's Nana's house at?" And when we got around those trees in the building, there was nothing but trees down till we got to my aunt's house, which is that house right there, the yellow one. She was on the porch and she was screaming, "They had no time. They had no time. They had no time."
Marissa's mom and dad, 8 cousins, 1 family friend, all killed as days of relentless rain turned this mountain into a merciless mudslide.
As fast as the storm came is as fast as it left.
We can bounce back.
Oh yeah, they can bounce back.
Yeah.
But they need some help.
Yeah, absolutely need lots of help.
People like you were.
Volunteers is what's done it. Am I wrong?
No.
No. I mean, it's been all volunteers.
And it's a community. I mean, it's our counties. It's people from out of state.
As we enter another hurricane season, the road to recovery from Hurricane Helene continues for many in North Carolina. Jennifer says the most requested items on the weekly wish list include paper products, toiletries, along with laundry detergent, dish soap, diapers, and meat. Now, she's committed to making supply runs to the mountains as long as there is a need. So if you're wondering how you can help, we've made it easy. Right now on fox5atlanta.com, you'll find a full list of ways you can give, whether by donating essential goods or by offering financial support. Even the smallest act of kindness can make a big difference for families still rebuilding.
Hurricane Helene left behind catastrophic damage in parts of Georgia, but still could have been much worse. Fox 5 Storm Team meteorologist Alex Forbes takes a look at what a worst-case scenario for our area would look like and just how close Helene came to it.
September 2024 certainly raised eyebrows in metro Atlanta, a strengthening hurricane in the Gulf, and the city of trees in the cone of uncertainty. Because we're 250 miles from the Gulf Coast, we're never going to see certain aspects of major hurricanes like storm surge or Category 5 winds. There's too much land between us and the coast. But we can still see significant impacts, just as eastern Georgia did last year with Helene. I caught up with Fox Weather's Brian Norcross, who says the center of Hurricane Helene, directly over or just west of metro Atlanta, comes pretty close to a worst-case scenario.
Not only would you have gotten the impacts in Atlanta, you would have gotten the impacts for a long period of time, because large systems are kind of linear on one side. So if that side is affecting you, it takes a long time for that to clear.
So if Hurricane Helene was not a worst case scenario for north and central Georgia, what would be? Well, you would have a lot of the same characteristics Helene had, which is why we were watching it very closely. But 2 key differences stand out to us. The first is that the center of the storm would need to be further west than the center of Helene was. That would put metro Atlanta on the dirty side of the storm. The other thing is Helene at its peak intensity was stronger in the Gulf before it made landfall. Had it have been any stronger at landfall, it still would have had a whole lot of land to work through before reaching our part of the state.
Large, fast-moving storms into metro Atlanta with the tree canopies and the hilly terrain that can easily produce 20 inches of rain. It's kind of a nightmare scenario.
A nightmare scenario that was perhaps best captured by this NASA satellite photo, a sea of darkness sitting just east of metro Atlanta. Alex Forbes, Fox 5 Storm Team.
If you're wondering why a worst-case scenario would come from the Gulf instead of the Atlantic, there are 2 reasons. First, the sea surface temperatures of the water are warmer in the Gulf. And secondly, historically, the hurricanes that affect Georgia come from the Gulf. Thousands of people were in the dark when Hurricane Helene rolled through Georgia, taking out power poles. We'll show you how Georgia Power recovered and how they're preparing for the next storms. And it's heartbreaking video we will never forget. People climbing to the roofs of their homes to escape rising floodwaters after Hurricane Katrina. We'll take a look back at the historic storm that struck 20 years ago and lessons that forever changed how weather is forecasted. And before we go to break, tropical trivia. And as you know, the average number of named storms each year is 14. Well, which year had the most named storms and which year had the fewest? The answers when we come back. Before the break, we asked the average number of named storms each year is 14. Which year had the fewest and which year had the most? Well, 2020 has had the most named storms. That was 30. 1914 had the fewest with just 1. This year is the 20th anniversary of the hurricane that most every other hurricane is measured against, Katrina. It was the perfect storm of circumstances. The monster hurricane tore apart the levees of New Orleans and flooded the city and left damage all along the Gulf Coast. We all remember watching the images in disbelief. Entire neighborhoods flooded, people trapped on the roofs of their homes being rescued by helicopters. Residents of New Orleans with no other option but to walk through floodwaters and across bridges to try to get to safety. And thousands of people packed into the Louisiana Superdome, stuck in deteriorating conditions with no other place to go. It was one of the worst disasters in American history, forever changed the way we predict hurricanes. Fox 5 Storm Team meteorologist Joanne Feldman talked to Keith Stellman, the meteorologist in charge for the National Weather Service office here in Peachtree City, about the changes made after Katrina.
Events like this do tend to expose how things could be done differently or more effectively, especially in hindsight. Your personal opinion on what you think some of the biggest lessons that were learned during that time?
There was, on the day before Katrina made landfall, on the 28th, New Orleans put out a very strongly worded hurricane local statement. And there were terms in there that says in fact, it led off with devastating or extreme damage expected. And it led off with things like most of the area will be uninhabitable for weeks, perhaps longer. They went out with that wording because they saw the intensity and the strength of the storm surge that was going to be coming into that region. And they used that wording to try and get the people who had stayed there because they survived Camille. Camille was in 1969, and there were still a lot of survivors in the area. So they went out with a very strongly worded HLS to try and entice those folks to leave because it wasn't going to be the same as Camille. It was actually going to be a much bigger storm surge. And so a lot of that wording, that technique that we use to put in some higher end wording in the hurricane stuff has then since spilled over into things like our tornado warnings and our degrees and our catastrophic and our emergency wording. That was one of the big things that came out of Katrina as well.
Yeah, I remember reading that wording and thinking we have never seen anything like this. And there was a good reason, because we had not seen a storm quite like that one. I do want to ask before I let you go, as we are getting ready to start a brand new hurricane season, what do you want people to know?
Biggest thing is obviously not focus on the exact path of the track. Hurricane Katrina set a record here in North Georgia for tornadoes. Look how far removed we were from the storm. And so the center of the path is not necessarily where the worst of the damage is. The damage can extend well away from the center, and even the coast. We saw that with Helene last year. Some of the damage that occurred in Asheville and up in the mountains last year was just catastrophic. And so obviously we want to pay attention to not just where the hurricane is, but how strong it is and how far the impacts are going to extend well inland.
That is good advice. And Keith, we appreciate your perspective and expertise. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
When Hurricane Helene hit last year, its strong winds took down thousands of power poles. We'll have a look at what Georgia Power had to do to get the lights back on and how they're preparing for this year's hurricane season. But before we go to break, tropical trivia. What is the highest wind speed ever recorded in an Atlantic Basin hurricane? We'll have that answer when we come back. Before the break, we asked what's the highest wind speed ever recorded in an Atlantic Basin hurricane. It was 190 miles per hour during Hurricane Helene in 1980. When Hurricane Helene hit Georgia last year, it toppled trees, ripped off roofs, caused massive flooding, but it also knocked down thousands of power poles. Power poles that Georgia Power had to rush to repair. Fox 5 Storm Team meteorologist Lauren Robinson takes a look at what it took to get the power back on and the lessons they learned from that storm.
Last fall, Hurricane Helene ripped its way through southeast Georgia, with its biggest impacts being heavy downpours and, of course, damaging winds.
For Hurricane Helene really impacted almost 12,000 poles for us. And if you look back to 2018 with Hurricane Michael, we only had roughly 1,000 or so poles. So this is something from a magnitude was something we hadn't seen before.
With wind gusts coming in at over 100 miles per hour, the storm blew a long line of destruction, knocking down everything in its path, including poles and power lines. But Eric McIntyre with Georgia Power says this is exactly what the company prepares for.
For us making sure that we're prepared, and we're always planning for the worst case scenario in terms of drills and preparation and tabletop exercises. And so we're planning for all those worst case scenarios.
Preparing ahead of the storm and cleaning up the mess it leaves behind. Georgia Power says they brought in 20,000 professionals to help restore power.
We brought in personnel from 35 different states, and we actually brought people from Canada, as far as Canada and California. So we were utilizing our mutual assistance process to really bring and meet the needs of the state of Georgia.
Now, while Hurricane Helene was initially projected to run right through Metro Atlanta, our state's most heavily populated region, it ended up falling a bit further east. Now, McIntyre says whether the next storm hits the state's smallest county or largest city, they're preparing for every possibility. Reporting in Atlanta, I'm Lauren Robinson for Fox 5 News.
Helene, along with Beryl and Milton, were all retired as hurricane names last year. Now, when a hurricane causes significant damage or loss of life, they are pulled from the list and never used again. Here's the list for the 2025 tropical season in the Atlantic Basin. And one thing that stands out is we have a new D storm. Dexter joins the list. This is recycled every 6 years unless something gets retired, and that is 2019's Dorian. Remember Dorian, a Cat 5 hurricane that raked across the Bahamas, the worst hurricane that island chain has ever seen. Now, our next tropical trivia question, as we just said, devastating tropical systems get their names retired. Well, which letter has the most retired names? The answer after the break. Plus, volunteers gathered to pack disaster kits before hurricanes hit. We'll have some items of what to put in yours so you can be ready for the storms. And the answer to our tropical trivia, we asked which letter has the most retired names? Well, that answer is I. 13 retired names, including Ian, Irma, and Ivan. Ahead of this year's hurricane season, hundreds of volunteers from Home Depot pack thousands of disaster cleanup kits. They'll be passed out by the foundation's nonprofit partner, Convoy of Hope. Now, the kit includes trash bags, work gloves, N95 face masks, paper towels, and other supplies. And they'll be distributed immediately after a disaster. You can also pack your own disaster preparedness kit before the storms arrive. Be sure to include several days' worth of bottled water and non-perishable food. Remember to add a can opener or a utility knife. And don't forget food and water for your pets. Also, pack a flashlight with extra batteries, travel-sized toiletries, and a first aid kit. Don't forget your prescription medications, cleaning supplies like garbage bags, paper towels, cleaning spray, and copies of essential paperwork like birth certificates, driver's licenses, social security cards, passports, and insurance policies. Hurricanes, as you know, develop over those warm ocean waters. That's why hurricane season runs through November the 30th when the seas are at their warmest. The peak of the Atlantic hurricane season is mid-August to late October. September is the most active month for hurricanes. Now, our mission here at Fox 5 is to keep you and your loved ones informed and safe during a storm. You can rely on the Fox 5 Storm Team to have the information you need to know. Make sure you download the Fox 5 Storm Team app. It's a valuable resource right there in the palm of your hand. Thank you for joining us for Eye on the Tropics. Good night.